Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 67 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is AJ Matthew, and with me, as always, is the awesome Scott Ball on the other side of the screen and the country.
That's right. Awesome, though. That's hard to live up to, AJ. So
you'll prove it in this episode, Scott, I know. So we're talking this week about assessing church health, and we're going to talk through 5 essentials of church health, plus a bonus, so stick around.
Yeah, I think a great place to start with this, AJ, is to understand that church is really hard right now. Leading churches is really difficult right now. It's a season of upheaval. It's a season of change. It's a season of a lot of uncertainty. And we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast over the last several months, certainly through the course of the pandemic. But what this churning, this upheaval is doing, AJ, is it's exposing a lot of things. Yeah, several episodes ago, we talked about how when you start to renovate a house and you start peeling back carpet, you start to maybe uncover mold and rotten floorboards and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but the question is, and the problem is that churches don't know why they aren't growing.
Yeah.
Even before the pandemic, people weren't really sure why. And so they intrinsically felt like we need to change something. I think one of the misnomers or misconceptions about churches is that they don't ever do anything new.
Right.
I don't think that that's true.
Yeah, it's not, for sure.
Yeah, most of the churches we work with have tried something new in the last, handful of years or whatever. Now they didn't quit anything old either; they just kind of added on top of with something new, but it didn't really affect any change. And in fact, that can actually lead to one of the reasons why churches or congregations don't want to work with us or consulting groups. They think, well, we've tried everything. Yeah. I don't know what these folks are going to do that's going to be any different than what we've tried. Mm-hmm. And the problem, though, is that the solution is not you need to do all these new things. There's no silver bullet strategy that fixes church dysfunction. Although there may be some new things you need to do. Let me be clear about that. There isn't a silver bullet strategy that's going to fix your church. You have to go back to the fundamentals. When it comes to getting your church healthy so that you can grow and reach your city, you have to go back to the fundamental things first and discover where there is dysfunction at the root cause, at the root level. Deal with that there, and then develop strategies for the future that are in alignment with a healthier fundamentals. Yeah. Does this make sense?
Yeah, for sure. In most cases, they look for the solution in programming. And they just gloss over the fact that, all right, we do Sunday, we do Wednesday, we've got Sunday school, or we've got a small group, and we do some classes, some Bible study stuff. And I think they just kind of take those for granted. Like, we're doing the stuff a church is supposed to do. Now, what's the program that's really going to reach, our neighborhood or our city, or not even that, but just really get our people to be excited about being here at church again? And that's where the failure comes in, because unless you roll back and you look at the things that you think you don't need to look at, and you're just, throwing darts at the programming board, trying to figure out which one is really going to make a difference, that's where you waste a lot of time and energy and become frustrated and think then that, well, there's nobody, we've done everything. There's nobody that would have a new idea. And we're probably not going to bring you a new programming idea. We might. And we can brainstorm a lot of things together, but we're going to talk essentials first, fundamentals, and make sure that you're doing the correct things the right way. And then for today's focus, also understanding how to measure that so that whether you're effective in those areas.
That's right. Off air, I was telling you about my deep sadness that I feel about the Dallas Cowboys this year. I'm a big Cowboys fan. Much to the chagrin, I'm sure, of many of our listeners.
Deep sadness probably is a term that comes up with a lot of Cowboys fans often.
That's right. Yeah, it's a regular experience. But one of the things that's interesting this year, something that I've railed against on this podcast for since we've been going, is this idea of the trick play. That something I've noticed the Cowboys have done more trick plays this year than I've ever seen them do. And when they work, which isn't always, but when they do work, it makes for a great highlight. It's great on ESPN. Look at this cool thing that happened. But at the end of the day, you're not going to win football games that way. I think we did win, technically. We won one football game this year off a trick play in the last minute. But the Cowboys right now, at the time of this recording, I think are 3-8 on the year. And here's the truth. Trick plays don't matter when you aren't doing the fundamental things well.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not running well, not blocking well, when you can't hold on to the football, you're turning it over. All of these problems, these fundamental problems, you got to deal with those things first. Then if you want to do a trick play, it works because you can back that up with the fundamentals. Same thing in your church. So many times churches are thinking, man, we got to jump to the trick play. Mm-hmm. What is that one thing that we could do, this event we could run, this new program we could add? These are trick plays, but we've not dealt with the fundamental things first. And trick plays in church can work, but only if you're doing the fundamental things. And so but just to kind of get us now into the meat, AJ, of this episode in talking about assessment, the challenge is that many churches don't know, A, maybe they don't even know what the fundamentals are, mm-hmm. and B, I would guess if you're a pastor and you're listening to this, you're going to hear these terms and you're going to be familiar with all of them. But even if you know what the fundamentals of church health are, you might not know how to assess them. And so that's what we want to talk about. How can you know if you're healthy in these 5 areas, plus, as you said, as a bonus area here?
Yeah, so let's jump into that. So our first one that we're going to talk about is having a Great Commission focus. Mm-hmm. And so before you click stop now on the podcast, or you're like, let's go see what Carrie Newhoff has to say today. Stick with us because
which is fine. You can listen to do that later. Finish this first. Yeah.
But you probably are not focusing on this as much as you think you are, or you've not maximized it to your full potential and used a Great Commission focus as an effective tool in your ministry. Uh-huh. And so we always have to start here. We've got to make sure that the church is aligned with the 2 components of the Great Commission. First, evangelism, to go and make disciples, and the second, in edification or building up, maturing, training, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. So this has got to be the groundwork that's laid in our churches so that everything we build off of this going forward asks 2 questions. Are we going to make more disciples by doing this? And are we going to help mature people that are in our midst to greater maturity so that they become disciple makers? Yeah. I don't know a lot of churches we've worked with that when we started, they were like, oh yeah, we do that all the time. Yeah. It's just not usually the case. Now, you might, of course, you believe the Great Commission is important, and you would always describe your church as an evangelistic church, a disciple-making church. But you've got to peel back that carpet, like you said, Scott. Look at the floorboards. Are the boards, under your carpet that have evangelism and maturity written on them? Is that solid oak? Is that? Can you really bear some weight down on that? Or if we step too hard, are we going to maybe fall through that floor? So this is where we have to start. And Scott, our question for this, our assessment question is what is our mandate?
Yeah, not to mix too many metaphors in here, but have you ever watched the show Hoarders? You seen that show before?
Yeah, Hoarders there's some crazy going on in Hoarders.
Yeah, when it comes to mission, I think a lot of churches are a little bit like Hoarders. They want to be about the Great Commission, yes, but also we want to be a cool place, or we want to be a place where people feel comfortable, or we want to be the social club for the senior saints, and we want to be and so you've crowded what was once a living room, which was meant for watching television and hanging out, is now also, a closet, is also this and that. When you see Hoarders and you go, man, how can anybody live in this? That room doesn't have a clear function anymore. It's yes, it's a living room, but it's also all these other things. And that's what happens with churches. So churches sometimes hear this and they go, well, of course we care about the Great Commission. It's not that you don't care about the Great Commission. Is it that you have a Great Commission focus? Does you have that intentionality there, or are a lot of other competing missions crowding in on things that are maybe good things?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're hardcore about teaching the Bible here, okay, or we're really active in making sure we're fighting against the culture war. We're fighting the culture war here. Whatever. These might be okay things, generally speaking, but they're not the thing, right? Which is the Great Commission. So, have you become a mission hoarder, and you've got lots of missions that are crowding out the purpose of your church, the intention of your church, the mandate of your church?
Right.
So, yeah, the assessment question here is, what is your mandate? If you think, well, we've got several, well, that's not good. You need just one mandate, and we believe foundationally that mandate should be rooted in the Great Commission.
And when we get down to actually assessing our effectiveness in this, then we've got these two components of the Great Commission that we need to be measuring then. How well are we making disciples, and how well are we maturing people? And so we've got somewhat of a quantity question on the first one. I mean, there's a lot of ways of looking at this, but there could be a number there. I mean, really, have we baptized anyone? Has anyone new come into our church that didn't know Jesus and now does? Or outside the church. And then are we maturing people, which isn't necessarily going to be a quantity question. It's going to be a quality question in measuring the effectiveness of our ministries in helping people grow in their faith and display attributes that would prove that they're maturing in their faith. So,
wow, what a great segue to the next thing that we need to measure.
All right, what's our second one, Scott?
Well, the second one here would be, if you are going to say, well, our mandate is to make and mature disciples, I think the natural follow-up question is, what exactly is a disciple? So if you want to qualitatively assess, are we seeing the sort of the discipleship fruit of in our church, you should be able to articulate what that discipleship fruit is. And in our language, this is what core values are. It's the discipleship culture that we're wanting to build in our church. And so our core values would be actionable core values, we would say. These are not just ideals that we aspire to, but actions that we can see expressed and lived out in our people and through our ministries. So the question here then is, what motivates us?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
What are we excited about seeing change in people? So to kind of bring these together, as far as attributes that we might see mature believers display, and what gets us as leaders in the church excited about making that happen? Well, we can bring this down to some values that we saw in the first century church. Look at what was happening in Acts chapter 2 after Peter's amazing sermon that you probably deliver every Sunday. But they naturally expressed their faith and maturity in a way. Maturity is kind of funny. It was the birth of the church, but I think we saw, maybe this would be that the Genesis question was like, well, how many rings did the churches have in the garden? Well, you know what? On Pentecost Sunday, I think the church had a lot of rings. I think it displayed itself as a wise old church that knew the right things to do. And so when we look at these things, the people worshiping, the people fellowshipping, and the people with exceedingly generous to one another and sharing the word and praying and all these things that the church was doing right off the bat, they hold true for us today. And that's what should excite us as leaders. Like, aren't we passionate about seeing our church expressed in these same ways and seeing people doing these things and seeing the growth that comes from them and seeing the fruit that's born out of that? Then that's what should motivate us to organize our church in a way that people will be doing these things and growing and maturing in them, which kind of brings us to number 3, doesn't it, Scott?
Well, before we move on to the next one, I just want to say, if you're looking around at your church and you're not seeing people behaving in a way or being disciples in a way that you feel like is very good. You've got a lot of people who are complainers, or people who aren't open to change, people who are defending their traditions more than they are wanting to see more people know Jesus. I have some hard news for you. You have the disciples that you built. So, and I'm not saying you individually as the pastor are solely responsible, but you're partially responsible by either allowing or creating a culture that doesn't value the things that we see in Acts chapter 2, or values other things above those things. One of the things that we've talked about this in a previous episode. If you want to go back and look at unhealthy values, I think it's one of our earlier episodes that we did. But what we often see is that a church maybe does value something that is healthy, but it's crowded out by something that is unhealthy. And so it suppresses the healthy thing. The unhealthy thing will always suppress the healthy thing. So it's a little bit like if you wanted to go on a diet, and so you decide, well, I'm going to eat salad, and I'm going to eat, kale, and I'm going to eat all these other things, but I'm also going to continue to eat, chicken wings and pizza every night. It doesn't matter how much kale you eat if that the calories from that pizza and the fried chicken wings suppress anything good you're doing with the nutrition. So same thing with unhealthy values. No, even if you have healthy values, they're going to be overridden by unhealthy ones. So it's the evaluation question here, AJ, is what motivates us, because we need to understand not only those healthy things that drive us, but also the unhealthy things that drive us, so that we can intentionally begin to walk away from those things.
Yeah, right. I call them anti-values. You got to identify the anti-values, and don't let that be a one-time exercise. Keep them in front of your leadership team so that you can catch each other and hold each other accountable. You can look at that little list on the wall in that back room where you're making decisions that day and go, hold on, I think we're looking like the old us. And
that's right.
Let's not do that. All right,
Scott. This is what Paul does, right?
Right.
You once were this, but now it's a new creation. You're this. It's the same idea. You want to understand this is who we were, and this is who we're going to be, and we're going to be this person and not be this person.
Yep.
Okay.
Boy, that Paul was something else. Number 3, we're and all these are kind of building, and these are in an order because this is a great way of working through these things. But our their assessment question that we're asking is, how will we structure our ministries? We're looking for effectiveness in maturing disciples in the church, a discipleship pathway that leads to greater maturity. And so we're going to take these values, these things that motivate us, that we want to see happening in people's lives, we want to see our church doing corporately, and we're going to build them into a structure that is very simple, and it will move people from point A to point Z in their maturity to become disciple makers.
Hopefully not point Z. Hopefully you have
don't have 26 points your discipleship pathway. So
that would be not a good idea.
Here's going to be point A to point C, or possibly point E.
Yeah, this is such a good point. So yes, like you said, these are building upon one another. We'll probably cycle back to this towards the end, but you want to move through these in this progression. You want to start with the mission question, values question, then the pathway question, because the pathway question only works if you understand the values question. So once we've decided this is what a disciple looks like, they value these things, then you have to say, well, then how are we intentionally building these values into our people? So again, if you look around at your church and go, I'm just not seeing the discipleship results that I would hope to be seeing, then you probably then don't have a very effective discipleship pathway. It might not be that you don't have one, but again, the metaphor we use here a lot, AJ, is that garage that's just filled with stuff that you can't even fit the car in anymore. The only way, you can't go around it just trying to find the individual things, clean it up by just trying to find individual things to take out. You have to pull everything out of the garage. And understand then, how are we going to structure this? How are we going to organize this so that everything has its place, and then what needs to go. And so the evaluation question here, as you said, AJ, is how are we going to structure ministry? How are we going to structure what it is that we're doing so that we get the outcomes that we've mapped out in the core values question? So
Right.
very often, AJ, especially in established churches, although not exclusively, we see this in newer churches too, and even in large churches, just like programs increasing at an exponential rate without any real intentionality. It was a good idea. Someone didn't want to say no. They just said yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very permissive culture. So you got all these ministries and they're not really connected to one another, and it's just burning people out. Not a lot of involvement in any one thing. And then something like the pandemic hits and you're forced to scale back, but then you don't really know what the point of anything is. And that causes real problems. And so you're not really structuring ministry. You're not really doing ministry. Ministry is happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And ministry is not achieving the outcome. Ministry is the outcome itself, AJ, in most of these churches. It's just the monster that they have to keep feeding.
Right. Just keep doing.
Yeah, just keep doing. And we're not focusing on the outcome of it. We're just trying to keep the thing running.
Right. And then again, bringing this back to, our major theme today of assessment. If you know what outcomes you're looking for, then you can measure whether you're achieving those outcomes or not. So
That's right.
we're always looking at assessing results, not inputs, but outputs. So this is the framework that everything always has got to be looked at, the lens to look through.
Yeah, really good.
Speaking of lens and making sure that that's clear, our next point is vision clarity. See how well these things work together, Scott?
Right.
All right, our
Number
question,
5 is
vision question is where are we going? And this can be a real challenge for a lot of churches and a lot of leaders to really bring clarity into a destination that this congregation is moving towards. And that's what vision shows us. It's a destination of sorts. We may never get there over time. Maybe, there'll be some nuanced changes, but can almost guarantee wherever your church is starting from today, there would be a destination that could be identified, clarified, and communicated that would motivate not only yourself, your leadership team, but your entire church to work in unity towards getting there. And you can't get there without the previous 3 things that we just talked about. If you don't have the first, if you don't have your Great Commission focus and a great understanding of what you should be doing and how you should be doing it, then you're never going to get to the end result of this great place that God has called you to. And I guarantee you some component of that great place is going to be that you've really effectively lived out the Great Commission, because there are an awful lot of people, even in your town, that are not followers of Christ and will need to hear that. So vision clarity has got to bring you to that place that you are living out your mission.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a symbiotic relationship between the previous 3 questions and this 4th one. If you have the first 3 questions answered, but you don't have vision clarity, it feels a little bit like the myth of Sisyphus, where you're pushing the rock up the mountain every day. So that's where that mission of what it is that you're trying to do. We're pushing this rock up this mountain. But then at the end of the day, it rolls back down the mountain. And so then you have to, if it just feels useless and pointless, what is it even all for? And vision clarity helps to establish where are we going so that you aren't Sisyphus just pushing the rock up the mountain every day, that you really are on a journey towards a specific destination. Think back to a time in the life of your church where you were doing maybe a collective project or a capital campaign or a building project, something like that. Very often we'll hear, as we're talking with churches, this was a rallying point and a unifying thing. Everyone got excited. Everybody was giving their money. Everyone wanted to pitch in and participate. And then the building was done. And then there was this sense of, well, what's next? Now what? You always have to have something that you're looking forward to. If you've ever been depressed, and I have, just full disclosure, I've had seasons of life where I was experiencing depression. One of the key ways, at least for me, everybody's different, but for me, one of the key ways to get out of depression is to have something to look forward to, something that you're genuinely saying, I've got, even if it's something simple, like I'm going to have coffee with my friend. That's something I'm excited about and looking forward to. You can get organizational depression much the same way. When you don't have something that you're looking forward to organizationally, you start to feel organizationally depressed. What is the point of this? Why are we doing this? Why do I have to get up and preach another sermon, write another, Sunday school curriculum, do another outreach event? It feels very pointless.
Yeah.
So if you want to rally your church and build excitement in your church, you have to know where it is that we are going. And you have to always have a place that you are going. Just because you had vision in the past doesn't mean you have vision now.
Yeah. This reminds me of this summer, Scott. Me and my sons hiked Pikes Peak with our Trail Life troop.
Yeah.
And, driving into Colorado Springs, you can see the summit, from miles and miles away. And even as you get a little bit closer, you can continue to see the summit. But once you get on the trail, you don't see the summit anymore. And it was miles and miles of effort before we could see the summit again. And it's hard to stay motivated when you can't see the end. Yeah. And all you see are obstacles in your way. So much like this in the church, if you don't keep this vision in front of everybody, and I'm talking about verbally talking about it, continuing to point people to it, so that they can see it in their mind where you're going, it's easy to lose focus. It's easy to lose motivation. And those obstacles that come along the trail might make you decide just to turn back and go home, or to just set up camp there and say, well, we put in a lot of work. We've made it a pretty good distance. Maybe we'll just stop. And so you've got to be able to keep your eye on the summit and make sure that people know what it looks like and how great it's going to be standing on top of that mountain, to keep them motivated on the trail.
That's right. Yeah. So good. Well, if we're going to go somewhere, then we have to have a plan for how we're going to get there, which leads us to fundamental number 5, which is strategy deployment. So this just differs a little bit from your pathway. If you want to think about pathway as like a process. This is the way in which we make disciples.
This is the way.
The strategy deployment question is more specific. So the question that we would ask here, the assessment question, AJ, is what will we get done this year? What will we do this year? What will we accomplish this year? Mm-hmm. So there is a task above and beyond the process things that you have to do. There is continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. There is refining things. There is trying new things. There is creating new systems. There is all these kinds of things that have to get done that improve your process and drive you towards your destination. So that's the relationship that strategy has. You got to think of it like a little, I don't know, like a little robot that goes around and is always looking for things that are breaking down or not working, and fixing them and trying to improve them so that you can continue to be effective in the process and move towards your destination. So the strategy deployment question is, what are you doing this year? What do you focus on this year? We like to think of these things as maybe 3 to 5 specific projects, again, above and beyond the normal ministry operations, that keep you fresh, that keep you moving forward and making sure that things don't get long in the tooth. Yeah. The reason why oftentimes your church, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, I mean, these are not like just some sideline things. These are projects related to this new essential process that you have in place to bolster it, to improve the outputs that you're wanting to see.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you want to think of it like a factory, if you've ever seen some like a mechanical engineer type person, or would one of the things that engineers do, and I know this because I've got a buddy who he doesn't work there anymore, but he used to work for a tire manufacturing plant, and his whole job was to go and watch the guys who make the tires. Like, he didn't make tires. He watched the guys who were making tires, and he would look for inefficiencies in the way that they were doing it. And he would talk to them, and he would be like, tell me how you're doing this. And they would often have ideas like, I need a tool so I don't have that does such and such, so that I don't have to do 5 hand movements. I could just do 2 and get the same work done. You got to think about strategy deployment in that same way. You're looking at how can we create efficiencies within our process. So just like, such a good point. These are not tangential projects that you want to take on. These are projects to improve your process. So a project for your first step in your pathway, one for your second, third, fourth, if you have 3 to 5 steps, one project for each step every year. So it's not like a one-time thing. Every year you should have some way that you were trying to intentionally improve that part of your discipleship pathway.
Yeah, which is an important culture shift to build into your church, is that you're constantly looking for improvement and just taking on things that will make your outputs greater than they were last year. And that probably would be a big change in a lot of churches, because you probably had things in the past that you've done, like, hey, let's buckle down, let's do this. But then it was just like, hey, glad that's done. We don't ever need to do that again. But there's always improvement to be made. And year after year, as you hone in on different things, and especially maintaining a process for making and maturing disciples that starts to really bear fruit and is determined to be effective, then you're just making these small changes maybe from year to year. But wow, what an improvement you'll see as you're focusing in on this more granular effort and really honing what you do. And just, finding that success is going to be so exhilarating as well. So there's a huge hope component to this whole thing that, it gets me excited, gets Scott excited. And, because we're able to like look at your church and say, wow, we can see the potential here. If you'll do this, if you'll do this, then you'll gain that excitement as well. And we want to see that happen for you too. But getting a little bit off.
It. Yeah. This is maybe the difference between healthy and unhealthy churches. Healthy churches look at strategy or strategy deployment as a way to improve the fundamentals. Unhealthy churches look at strategy deployment as a way to add on top of the fundamentals. And that's so many times when we hear churches go, oh, well, we just need to try something new. I get a little piece of me dies inside. And I think, no, probably that's not what you need. New things are good, but new ways to adapt the fundamental things is better than adding things into your Hoarders living room of all the different missions that are crowding in on you, and all the different programs you're trying to execute.
Okay, so let's move on to our bonus. We just went through the 5 essentials of having a Great Commission focus: actionable core values, an effective discipleship pathway, vision clarity, and strategy deployment in your church. But the 6th component that permeates all areas of the church is the leadership of the church. Probably you or somebody that you work closely with, maybe in your congregation. But who is going to drive us forward in this? That's our assessment question. That would be a fundamental question to ask. I hope you've got clarity already in who will drive this forward, but a lot of churches don't. And maybe who your senior pastor is, if you have one presently. But you may not really, that may not be the same person right now who is driving the church forward, if the church even feels like it has any forward momentum right now. And so reestablishing, and I'm not saying, hey, our senior pastor is not going to be in charge anymore. I'm talking about clarifying his or her role in the church in championing these essentials. And you might even have to step back and say, well, who is going to be on the team that's going to first help us establish these essentials in the church, or reestablish, and then be the primary party responsible for making sure that changes happen and that your church continues to move forward. And there's a lot that goes into leadership in the church, and we break it down into a pipeline of developing leaders always, from the lowest level volunteer to the highest level board position.
Yeah, I think that there's a number of ways that the leadership culture in a church can go sideways. So we call this kind of a bonus. Like, I really believe that the 5 things we talked about first are the essentials of church health. And then this sixth thing is another essential, but as you said, AJ, it sort of undergirds the other five. It's more like a foundation. And I think I was just thinking, I think I could think of 4 ways where leadership goes sideways. One would be sort of a tail wagging the dog type situation, where the congregation has inordinate control over what's happening and not happening. So when we're asking the question, who will drive us forward? The answer is nobody, because no one's going to make a decision while the tail is wagging the dog, right? So that's one way it goes sideways. Another is a bad board or an ineffective board. We've talked about this recently. We did a 2-part series on bailing on bad polity. Might want to go back and listen to that. But when the board situation's not quite right, you don't have the right people, or maybe you don't even have a board, you've got 19,000 committees, and that can also be sort of a wag the dog type situation. But a bad board, that can make leaderships go sideways. Another would be too few volunteers. You just don't have enough people to affect change. So when we think about who will drive us forward, as you said, AJ, it's not just your senior pastor, and it's not just your board, and it's not just your staff. It's all of the other positions that really need to drive it. And unless you have a really clear leadership pipeline, knowing what it is that every volunteer position is in your church and what role they play and at what level of leadership they're doing it, then chances are your leadership culture isn't as healthy as it could be. And then the last one I thought of was just an overburdened staff, which sort of is connected to the last one, but just this idea where the staff do everything. I think that happens a lot in churches, especially in larger churches where you maybe have 5 or 6 or 20 or 30 staff. There becomes a culture there where if we have a problem, we should just hire it out. We can just solve it by hiring someone to fix this problem, rather than empowering people in the church to help us with a particular issue. And that's not a healthy culture. I've worked on staff in these churches, knowing what that's like, where the expectation is we pay you people to do this.
Yeah.
And that's not good. That's not good. So there's a number of ways that the leadership culture can go sideways in a church. And there are some key questions that you could be asking. The most fundamental one is who's going to drive us forward. But we actually ask several questions about leadership to get to the heart of what might be healthy or unhealthy about your leadership culture in a service that we'd like to tell you about. Can we pivot to that now, AJ? Can we?
Sure.
I'm kind of excited about this.
Yeah.
I want to share. Oh, you want me to talk about it?
I thought you were going to go there. Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Here's another edit.
So, AJ, something that has been a part of the Malfers group from the beginning, as far as I know, certainly predates my time with the Malfers group or yours, is a service called the Church Ministry Analysis. And if you read Advanced Strategic Planning, doing a church ministry analysis is discussed in that book. And it's been a service that we've provided for churches for a long time. The problem is that it was expensive for an assessment, and it was time consuming, and a number of different things. And AJ, we're a nonprofit.
That's right.
So we're not motivated by making a dollar. We want to help as many churches as we possibly can. So we've made some significant changes to the church ministry analysis. So many changes, in fact, that we're calling it Church Ministry Analysis 2.0. And I want you to share the best news of all about this service. The price. Yeah.
Well, as you said, Scott, I mean, we're a nonprofit ministry, and we're so blessed to have partners in ministry with us. And we're blessed to live in a time in which technology can help drive down cost of things. So our Church Ministry Analysis 2.0 really continues to deliver, I think, a really great value in that. Now, though, we're really focusing in on getting answers to more fundamental questions and working through these 5 and bonus 6 things that we just talked about, so that we can really get to the heart of what's going on in your church in a simpler way. And still have something that this is not you answer a bunch of questions and then, you get a report, comes to you 30 seconds later because everybody gets the same thing. This is still a custom thing. So me or Scott or one of our guides is still going to go through what you've done, really take in the information and summarize some information back to you about the trends that we see, the results that we see, and also a numerical score so that you can kind of measure yourself against maybe what would be ideal. And then we're going to still do what we've always done, and that's spend time with you talking through it. So with every church ministry analysis 2.0 that is done, one of our guides is going to spend an hour or so on a Zoom call with you to talk through the report.
And not just you, with your leadership team, if you want to have them.
That's right. Yeah. And so here's the best part. Instead of this being cost prohibitive for a lot of churches, because especially our heart is that any church that needs the help can get it from us, regardless of their financial abilities or inabilities. So the new church ministry analysis 2.0 is just $99. And you're still getting a custom report. You're getting time with a guide to talk through the results and explain the results and continue to explain the 5 and bonus 6 pillars of church health that we think will really undergird a change in trajectory for your church to be gaining upward momentum in making and maturing disciples of Jesus. Super excited about this. And I mean, we didn't plan it, but I love that we have had it now ready to deploy at Christmas because, I think this is just a great gift to be able to give, to have a church find the hope that we find in Jesus, especially at his birth, and anticipate the work that he'll do in our churches and in our lives individually that we gain from this season of the year. And so we're looking into 2021 with great anticipation, like we did in 1999. 2020 didn't turn out to give us the results that we wanted.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think it's given us some results that were needed in the church. Mm-hmm. And I don't look back at 2020, Scott, with like failure and frustration. I look back at 2020 in some ways really giving us some clarity. The 2020 vision thing that we had a whole different idea for 2020 vision in 1999. And, God can take anything for his glory and for the good of his people. And I think he did in 2020. I think we gained a lot of clarity in 2020. And I think it has set us up for 2021 to be a greater disciple making year. And I think this is a tool that's going to help churches do that.
Yeah. Something that you brought up a second ago that I think is a point worth making is that we do assess you in these 6 areas and give you a score. And that score is not in comparison to other churches. It's in comparison to standard for health.
Yeah.
A lot of assessments are, well, how do you stack up against, other churches? And I'm not saying that that's not valuable in certain ways. I think it is, but I'd rather you just know, how are you doing compared to being fully healthy? That's what matters.
Yeah.
And you know exactly where you need to invest your time and effort, not to become as good as the church down the street, but how you can truly become a biblically healthy church. And as you said, AJ, these reports, it's about 20 or so pages. Every page has something written on it just for you and your church, and an interpretation of your responses and your data, because every church is different. So I love that we, even though the price is now just $99, we're still providing a fully custom report for your church and taking the time to meet with you and to meet with your leadership.
Yeah.
A heart behind the cost too, AJ, is that we want churches to have skin in the game, which is why it costs anything at all. But we didn't want it to be something that you have to go to your finance committee or 18 different congregational meetings to get signed off on. Mm-hmm. This is something that if you feel led to do it, hopefully with a conversation or so, or maybe just unilaterally, you can commit to doing this. And so starting today, you can go to malfersgroup.com/CMA, just the letters CMA, malfersgroup.com/CMA, and sign up. we'll get in touch with you after you sign up, walk you through the onboarding process, let you know how you get started, and we'll get moving on that.
Well, that's
starting this month.
That's another point also, Scott. I mean, this isn't, enter your credit card and then you automatically are taking the assessment. We have an onboarding process for this because this is a team task. So we want to work with you on who should take the assessment, get that team put together, understand why that team's important, and then we will create the custom assessment for you for your church, and you take it. So this is not a here's my credit card, let's click this, in 15 minutes I've got a report, and okay, great, that's good information. We're working specifically with you. This is a consulting service that we're working with you on and getting results specifically for your church and helping you understand and interpret them. So it really, I don't know any other way other than, the way we've been able to organize our ministry that could give the value to the church that I think the church will get out of this. So it really is exciting. And, I'm happy that we're able to be in this position. So
me too.
malfiersgroup.com/CMA, or today's show notes are at malfiersgroup.com/67. This is episode 67 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. And we'll certainly link it in there along with, the expanded version in writing of what we talked about today, so that you can run back through these points and maybe even begin thinking in your head, how do you measure up against these things right now? We want you to have the tools to assess your church in a way that lets you know whether your ministry has reached its peak effectiveness or not. There could be an argument made that it will never get there. There's always improvement that could be made. And we want to see you constantly improving. We want to see your church making and maturing disciples of Jesus. Thanks for being with us today on the Church Revitalization Podcast. We're looking forward to having you back again. We're praying for your ministry and we're working hard on your behalf. Thanks.
Yeah, we can't wait to hear from you doing a CMA.